If you live on an island, as we do for 5 months of every year, you can't just jump in the car when you need supplies, or as we do in Bloomington, walk to the grocery store. Since flying is no longer an option for us, we must go by boat. The trip is about 7.6 miles, and the weather, which can involve rain, wind, or even snow, is an important factor. We purchased the boat you see to make it relatively safe and comfortable in most weather conditions. We find that we make the trip about once a week, and we refer to it as going to town. On the island we moor the boat, which we have named Big Boat, in the boathouse where it is tied so that it floats between the docks. The boat is capable of hauling a lot of stuff at one time without losing much speed, and most often we have it loaded both coming and going. At this point in our show, we have loaded the boat, untied, backed out, and are heading out of the bay towards town. On this particular trip, we are not using the backmost curtain, which provides complete enclosure from the weather. We tend to leave the back open if possible because it's harder to load and dock when it is up. With the help of Google Earth, we're going to follow our route to town. Kenora is mostly north, but slightly west of A-Rene. With smaller boats we used to head right through Smuggler's Cove and save a bit of distance, but with the larger, faster boat we swing out around the cove and follow the eastern shore of Scotty Island. The red oval you see marks a small protruding rock with a non-lighted marker on it. It's not hard to spot in the day, but at night one must be careful. We pass on the left of Maisie's Island and head for the red buoy at the northern tip of Scotty. So far the route is fairly protected from most winds, the exception being one from the northeast. From the north tip of Scotty to Rocky Narrows is what we call the stretch. The open waters of the Manitou extend for many miles on the left, and the expansive Big Stone Bay on the right. This is often the waviest part of the trip. The small island I have labeled Blinker has many reefs around it, hence all the buoys. The channel used to be marked on either side of that island, but now only on the eastern route. The light on the island can be seen at night for a long way, coming or going, which is a very big help in the dark. Once through Rocky Narrows, the route goes between Lunny Island on the right and several small islands on the left. Two of these have fairly extensive camps on them. There is a green buoy just off a couple of small rocky islands and a ring buoy closer to town. When coming out from town, this area is the one where you are most likely to head in the wrong direction. I have marked in yellow how many people head. It's a very natural thing to do, but you wind up down in Big Stone Bay very lost. At this point in our journey, we are over half away to town. Boats coming from Bear Point often pass Allen's Island on the east, but the channel is on the west. It's very rocky but well buoyed, including a red blinker marking the only safe way through. In the 1950s this was as far out as the hydro came, and there were wires that we passed under. Now all electricity is delivered by underwater cables. The camps on Scotty Island that we see from A-Rene are electrified, and there is actually a transformer on the peninsula across from us. There are just two narrow channels to the northernmost part of the lake where it empties into the Winnipeg River. Devil's Gap is one of them. As we approach the gap, the land on the right is native reserve. There is a small island just off the old CPR camp which marks the entrance to the gap. We slow down there and take a hard right, hoping all the time that no hot rod will come blasting out, essentially blind through the entrance. The route through the gap is well buoyed, but can be a bit treacherous in high season, since most boats headed down the lake go through the gap. In recent years, we have rented a boat slip at Devil's Gap Marina. The marina is just a short distance east of the end of the gap. This does mean that to do our shopping, we must take the car the further mile and a half into town. We used to boat all the way to the Safeway docks, where we could usually moor for our time in town. The car was parked for free at the nearby rec center, but several years ago the town of Kenora abolished the free part of that deal. We now pay for both a boat slip and car parking at Devil's Gap Marina, and have found it very satisfactory. You can see that our boat slip and car parking spot are separated by quite a distance. We typically have a bit to unload, and when we are ready to go back out to the island, always have a lot to load. Ann fetches the car and moves it to a spot near the end of our dock. The marina provides carts for hauling. However, sometimes we have to walk a ways to find one. The carts do help speed the loading and unloading process. Included in our parking fees, we are allowed to place 2 bags of garbage per week in the marina dumpster. It is located up the hill from the gas dock, where we buy gas for our boats. The following pictures will show various stages of the trip back and forth, as well as some of the activities in town. Here we have just started out and are passing Joner's Guest House, which is on one of the Smuggler's Cove Islands. We usually limit our trips to town to once a week and prefer to go on Wednesdays, as that is the day that there's a farmer's market on the harbor front. If the weather is forecast to be bad, we adjust a day or two either way. This particular day was cloudy, a bit windy, but not raining, so we went. Here we see the previously mentioned blinker on the small island in the middle of the stretch. We are less than 2 miles from A Rene. We will always remember the day we started for town, when it was a bit foggy near home, but as we reached the stretch it really sucked in, and we were forced to stop and wait a half hour or so until it lifted enough to navigate. Usually about this time we are thinking about how we should order the various tasks on the agenda for the day. We don't need to do everything every time, but there is quite a list of regular or semi-regular errands. We are leaving Rocky Narrows behind, but are not quite halfway yet. Our list of regular errands/activities includes the following: a breakfast, first or second at the inn, the post office, the liquor control board for wine, the beer store to return empties for cash, Walmart for food and 1 or 2 miscellaneous items, Home Hardware for lumber and so forth, Canadian Tire for sheep manure and other hard goods, the farmer's market, sometimes the Royal Bank, and 1 or 2 nurseries. Safeway for our main food shopping, Energy Tech Services for propane, boat and small engine gas at the marina, Barsky Hill for recycling paper, glass, cans, and plastic, and the library. Occasionally we make stops to donate used stuff to the Salvation Army, or to visit our insurance broker, or to purchase parts for a chainsaw. And we also get some excellent hummus occasionally at the Plaza restaurant. We try to plan these stops to be efficient, but we have found that it pays not to rush. The engine in our 130 horsepower Honda outboard is essentially the same one Honda puts in some of the cars it builds. A lot of that horsepower goes to overcoming the friction between the boat and the water. Full throttle produces 5,500 RPM and about 40 miles per hour. Think how fast you would go if you ran your car engine at 5,500 RPM. Gas was running about $5 per gallon in Canada, so we decided to run at 4,500 RPM and save. We still go around 32 miles per hour, but get one extra trip to town on a tank of gas. The wind is often a factor in any trip on the lake. There's not as much open water in the northern half as down in the Big Traverse, but there are enough open areas to be a factor in our trips to town. When all we had were open 15-foot boats, a windy day meant two things for sure. One, we would bounce up and down a lot, often slapping the water in an uncomfortable jolt. Two, even with splash rails, spray would always drench everyone. Big boat has a cover which keeps the spray off the passengers, but if one runs at speed, it bounces uncomfortably. The solution is to slow down. Although it looks a bit choppy in this picture, by the time we reach Allen's Island, there are no big open stretches the rest of the way to the marina. As mentioned before, the blinker you see marks a safe passage through a very rocky area. The channel is fairly narrow, although wide enough for two boats to pass, but it curves enough so that one can't see much ahead in the channel. In earlier years, with smaller, slower boats, you were seldom surprised by a suddenly appearing boat. However, with almost all of us going much faster now, one has to be ready to slow a bit to avoid getting too close to another boat blasting through the narrows. At the entrance to Devil's Gap lies what old-timers refer to as the bungalow camps. Originally, the Canadian Pacific Railroad operated a tourist camp here. When the CPR downsized its tourist camp business, the bungalows were sold one by one to private parties. The only rub was that the land belongs to the local native band and was leased for 100 years. The 100 years was just up and the band refused to renew the leases. Hence you see the picture of a very deserted camp. Negotiations continue and it appears a new agreement is possible, although you can be sure the band will do much better financially this time around. The marina rents slips by the season, and they vary in price according to how close they are to land. You can save $100 or more by hauling your stuff out to a more distant slip. There are several carts provided for hauling, although they seem to always be far away from your slip when needed. The marina also rents car parking spaces. The more expensive ones are close to the water, hopefully right next to your boat slip. The gas pumps service boats and a good number of native cars as the government helps defray the cost of gas for natives. There is also a somewhat limited convenience store. Here Big Boat is resting quietly in slip after safely transporting us to town. The main use we make of the slip is for parking for half a day each week when we go to town. The marina has security personnel so that when we go to Winnipeg and so forth for a night or two, we can leave Big Boat in slip. Other people sort of do the opposite of us. Their boats are in slip a majority of the time and are out only for much shorter periods. There are several local business trades that do a lot of lake work and base their work boats at the marina. There is also a special wharf that is home to a large lake barge which takes on its load there. The store and associated gas pumps are really quite primitive, but they serve our basic needs. You can see several tires nailed to the docks for boats to bump up against. These make fine bumpers and are a lot cheaper to install and maintain than other types of protectors that are designed specifically for docks. Notice the covers on most of the boats. Without a cover, a 2 to 3 inch rain can put a lot of water in a boat, even to the point of sinking it. Big Boat's cover doesn't keep all the rain out, but enough so that we can weather a pretty heavy rain. One boat moored at the marina this summer was not so lucky. It was pointed skyward with the motor and back end underwater. One of the perks you get with slip rental is free disposal of 2 bags of garbage per week. Trash has always been a problem, and in the early years we made our own dump back in the woods. This was not a good solution, and in fact the cans and glass placed in our dump 40 to 50 years ago are still there. We have begun to slowly recycle them, but it will take some time. The Barsky Hill transfer station takes trash at $2 a bag, but it's a bit of a car trip, so the various marinas provide the service. Devil's Gap used to have 2 dumpsters that were homemade out of 3/4-inch plywood, but last year a bear came along and ripped large holes in the wood to get at the garbage inside, hence the steel ones you see. It's easy when you do things on a regular basis to develop traditions. One of ours, connected with our weekly trips to town, is to have a first or sometimes a second breakfast at the inn. The restaurant is located on top of the best Western hotel and has a spectacular view of the lake and the town. We have become good friends with our regular waitress, Caroline. We always have the same thing: oatmeal, sausage toast, coffee, and tea. It's gotten to the point where the cook knows what we order, and all Caroline has to do is tell him we're here. Tim, Caroline's husband, is a pilot who flies for the local charter service. He emails us pictures of the ice conditions during the spring breakup period. Here is part of the view. The island is called Coney Island, and the houses you see are occupied year-round. When the lake is ice-free, they come to town for school, work, etc. and buy their small boats. During the freeze-up, the town installs a floating lighted walking bridge over to the island. When the ice is solid, the island becomes part of the city, as there is an ice road that allows Coney residents to drive to town. There's a webcam located on top of the inn, so we can see this view and many others all year round. We had heard that the ice was always bad between Kenora and Coney, and one can see open water from the webcam most of the winter. The top of the inn also provides a good overview of Kenora. It looks all peaceful and calm, but it's actually going through some tough times right now. A few years ago there were 3 mills producing various wood products from the surrounding forest. Today 2 of them are on suspended operations, and a third is closed and is being torn down. The tourist industry was adversely impacted by the economic slowdown in the U.S. Young people have always left Kenora for greener fields, but currently there is almost a mass exodus to the oil fields of Alberta. Summer residents, such as ourselves, continue to provide economic punch. You might say our trips to town are important. One of our frequent errands is a relatively new one. Packaged alcoholic beverages are only sold at 2 government-run stores, the Liquor Control Board and the beer store. You now pay a deposit on each bottle, which can be refunded if you return the empties to the beer store. Here I am with our empties, waiting for a few loonies. The government of Ontario requires all municipalities to recycle paper, cans, glass, and plastic. For those who have no regular trash pickup, there is the transfer facility at Barsky Hill where we can bring recyclable materials. Another errand. Kenora has a farmer's market. Every Wednesday up through the first week in October, the tent on the harbor front is bustling with, quotes, farmers, both local and from Manitoba and the Fort Frances area. This Mennonite group is from a small town about 50 miles due west of Fort Frances. They sell a large variety of baked goods plus vegetables from their gardens. Their booth is one of the largest ones, and most times you have to stand in line a while before picking out your goods. Another farm from the Fort Frances area has a good choice of fresh vegetables. I often ask the vendors where they're from. The young woman replies, "Fort Frances, it's a long drive." As you see, not all the participants are paying customers. I think it's safe to say that everyone has a good time. We grew very fond of the fresh sweet corn at the market. We were able to get great tasting corn right up through the last market in October. Other booths have various meat products, homemade pickles, honey, and so on. There are many stalls featuring various crafts. All indications are that the market has been a success. You would expect it to attract summer people, and it does, but it's very popular at the full-time residents also. When all our errands are complete, we return to the marina. Actually, we sometimes have to make a run to the boat before all errands are complete because the car is just too full. We load Big Boat with lumber, gas, propane, sheep manure, food, wine, and so forth. We then retrace the route back to the island where we park at the floating dock as you see. The drill goes like this. As the boat nears the dock, Ann jumps out with ropes in hand and steadies the boat against the dock. I climb out and we tie up the boat. Ann climbs back in the boat and hands things out to me on the dock until the boat is unloaded. We then start schlepping things up the hill. When most of the groceries are in the cabin, Ann starts putting things away and I finish carrying the remaining things up. If it is not raining, Big Boat remains at the floating dock until evening. We are usually pretty tired by this time, and we have the Winnipeg Free Press and the Toronto Globe and Mail that we can read while taking a bit of a rest. We find that even if our trip to town is shorter than usual, we seldom get much else done on a town day. There is one exception to that, and that is if we bring back plants. They usually go into the ground before nightfall. We like to have Big Boat under cover for the night, so the last town-related activity is to return it to the boathouse. If the evening is pretty, we often take a spin on the lake on the way to the boathouse. Eventually, we approach the boathouse. It's not completely trivial to get a large boat in. In the first place, even idling, the boat moves forward at a fair speed. This means taking it out of gear just as you enter. You often have a crosswind to contend with, and it's surprising how much a little wind will blow the boat. While I maneuver, Ann prepares to catch the dock. We've gotten so that we usually do quite well, but a strong wind sometimes dictates more than a single approach. So we end our trip to town in the boathouse. We also have a routine for tying up Big Boat. Between trips to town, we mostly use our smaller boats, so Big Boat remains tied up for the week. The lake level can vary quite a bit in some weeks, so one has to check the mooring every so often. As we walk back to the cabin, we remark that it was a good day, but we were glad we don't have to go to town again for a week.